Earlier today, U.S. Representative Sharice Davids was in Wichita speaking with the families of victims that were killed in the January midair collision involving Flight 5342. She says the families are continuing to push lawmakers to pass legislation to make air travel safer around Reagan National. Dylan Domingue sat down with the representative today to talk about what more needs to be done following more airspace concerns in Washington.
You know, we've heard the FAA, we've heard the Army, we've heard the NTSB all talk about the recommendations that need to be made because of what happened on January 29th. But then 2 weeks ago, an Army helicopter was seemingly taking a scenic route from what the FAA has said and caused 2 flights in that same airspace to have to abort their landings. Sitting in your seat, what are you thinking when you hear the FAA admit that an Army helicopter didn't go to a helipad at the Pentagon, instead took a scenic route instead?
I mean, the simple answer is outrage. As a committee, we need to either come up with new legislation to address issues if there are things falling through the cracks, or do what we can to hold the FAA accountable. I know that, you know, the secretaries of transportation, the acting administrator of the FAA, and the secretary of the Department of Defense, they all need to be having those tough conversations. I have concerns about whether and how they're doing that, but I think that folks are valid and right to be frustrated when they're seeing news like that come out.
When the NTSB put out their preliminary report into the January 29th crash, they did something I think kind of rare, and they actually put recommendations in the preliminary report. Usually they wait till their final report to do that. It just shows how important that was for them. But given that they had another, of course it wasn't a mid-air collision like we saw January 29th, but with the helicopter taking the scenic route, and now, you know, I'm sure a lot of lawmakers and those in Congress are saying, what more do we need to do? You talk about the legislation, the final report from the NTSB probably not going to be released till maybe mid next year. What can be done in the time in between then?
I really do think that that is a demonstration of just how seriously everyone is taking this. Because these reports, the final report might not come out until next year. Sometimes they take longer than anyone could think that they possibly should, but it's because of how technical they get in their investigations. In the meantime, I do think that taking those preliminary recommendations, figuring out what, if any, updates to legislation need to happen.
We've heard from the NTSB say they can make as many recommendations as they want when it comes to air safety. Mm-hmm. It's up to Congress and it's up to the rest to fully fund that, you know, to make those recommendations possible. Because then the FAA has to weigh them out and say, okay, what can we reasonably put forward given the money that we have? Do you think there was enough bipartisan support or enough support just in general in Congress or in the administration to increase air traffic control safety, to increase maybe some of the outdated technology that it comes with when it comes to air safety, to be able to make those recommendations that the NTSB may come out with in a year?
I probably wouldn't be able to speak to what they might come out with and whether the funding levels are there for those things.
But is there enough support,
what I can say is I think that my hope is that we'll be able to continue some of the bipartisan support we've seen in previous Congresses. I think that the FAA reauthorization had, I wish that it had been on the news more, actually, because of the type of bipartisan support we saw. And in that was support for funding to upgrade our systems, both the airspace, you know, the air traffic control systems, as well as our landing systems and those technologies, funding to really ramp up air traffic control hiring.
When it comes to the January 29th crash, I think a lot of us now have kind of looked at the Army and the helicopter route as being a problem that kind of needs to be addressed with all the helicopter traffic in that area. But another issue that came up during it was Reagan National has added a lot more flights, I would say, in recent years, just from a lot of other places across the country. So it continues to increase the amount of just plane traffic that goes through.
Yeah, one of the busiest.
Already with the helicopter traffic. Do you believe, or have there been conversations about putting a cap on the amount of flights that can go into Reagan National?
I do think that every time we have an FAA reauthorization, that's part of the conversation. I think that generally the conversation, because there are agreements that have existed for a long time around that, but yeah, absolutely, the conversation about the how many flights are coming and going, and you know, I think that will probably be a bigger part of the conversation going forward. It's certainly something that a lot of folks have expressed concern about.